There's a popular narrative claiming that Donald Trump is supposedly an isolationist who's against war and intervention. In order to believe this, you have to ignore his extremely hawkish foreign policy during Trump's first term, when he killed the top Iranian general Qasem Soleimani and tried to overthrow the Iranian government. He also killed a top Iraqi military commander and occupied Iraq, refusing to withdraw U.S. troops from Iraq. He expanded the war on Yemen, brutally bombing Yemen. He expanded the war in Afghanistan. He boasted of selling offensive weapon systems to Ukraine.
Excuse me, I didn't. I'm the one that gave Ukraine offensive weapons and tank killers. Obama didn't. You know what he sent? He sent pillows and blankets.
He backed a coup attempt in Venezuela and waged economic war against Venezuela.
Venezuela. How about we're buying oil from Venezuela? When I left, Venezuela was ready to collapse. We would have taken it over. We would have gotten all that oil. It would have been right next door.
He backed a violent coup in Bolivia that overthrew Bolivia's elected government. He waged a trade war against China, and he even boasted of leaving U.S. troops in Syria to take its oil.
And then they say he left troops in Syria. You know what I did? I left troops to take the oil. I took the oil. The only troops I have are taking the oil.
So that was Donald Trump during his first term as U.S. president. Well, now he's coming back to the White House in January 2025. And what is he pledging to do in his second term? Again, very interventionist, hawkish policies. It's the opposite of isolationism. Donald Trump is threatening multiple countries, including he wants to colonize Panama and take over the Panama Canal in a blatant violation of the sovereignty of the Central American nation. Donald Trump also wants to expand the U.S. empire and take over Greenland, which is an autonomous territory. It was a colony of Denmark, and it has a large indigenous population. They do not want to be a colony of anyone. They want their own sovereignty. Trump and his nominees are discussing plans to invade Mexico, the U.S. southern neighbor, another blatant violation of sovereignty. And Trump is even talking about potentially annexing Canada and making it the 51st U.S. state. Now, Trump supporters claim this is a joke. It's not serious. But he's threatening the northern and southern neighbors of the U.S. He's threatening China. He's threatening Iran. This is the opposite of isolationism. This is extreme imperialism. Trump made an extremely bizarre post on Christmas on his website, Truth Social, in which he threatened Panama, China, Canada, and Greenland. Christmas is supposed to be about peace and love and family, but instead, Trump insisted that the U.S. will take over Greenland. He once again said that Canada should become the 51st state, which again is a not so subtle threat to annex Canada. And then he falsely claimed that Chinese soldiers are operating the Panama Canal, which is completely false, but Trump is trying to provide a justification for colonizing the Panama Canal, which he said very clearly he wants to take over, and he's using China as a boogeyman to try to justify that. And meanwhile, some of the biggest pro-Trump right-wing accounts on social media are talking about expanding the U.S. empire, colonizing Mexico, colonizing Canada, colonizing Cuba and Nicaragua. These huge pro-Trump accounts on Twitter that have millions of followers, largely because they're constantly promoted by Elon Musk, who's going to be a top official in the second Trump administration. They are invoking manifest destiny. This is blatant colonialism. Again, this is the opposite of isolationism. They're saying they want the U.S. empire to colonize sovereign countries, and they're portraying this as based. They're saying, oh, if you are opposed to imperialism and colonialism, it's because you're woke. This is not isolationism. This is blatant colonialism and warmongering. Another example of this was Donald Trump's former Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, Ezra Cohen, who is one of the top officials in the Pentagon in Trump's first administration. He quoted Trump's comments threatening to take over the Panama Canal And Ezra Cohen wrote in all caps, quote, "Make the Monroe Doctrine great again," end quote. Again, this was one of the top officials in Trump's Pentagon the first time. He's very likely going to come back in Trump's second administration. He's also worked with the CIA and previously with the Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA. This is a former top U.S. government official who oversaw the war machine's intelligence apparatus, and he's invoking the 200-year-old colonial Monroe Doctrine, which essentially claims that Latin America is the so-called backyard of the U.S. empire. These people are blatant neo-colonialists. And yet Trump and some of his allies claim that they're right-wing populists who are against neoconservatives, but they're showing that they're just as imperialist as neocons. They're threatening many countries with war, invasion, conquest, occupation, and colonization. And they can say it's jokes, but a lot of countries around the world are very scared because the US empire has invaded dozens of countries just in the past few decades. The US military has intervened in the vast majority of countries on Earth. So when the president-elect talks about annexing Canada and invading Mexico and taking over the Panama Canal, that's not seen as a joke. That's seen as a threat, given the historical precedent, which I'll be talking about today. Let's start with the Panama Canal. This is one of the most important trade choke points on Earth. About 5% of global maritime trade passes through the Panama Canal. And Donald Trump wants the U.S. to colonize the Panama Canal, to take it over, given the historical precedent that previously it had been U.S. colonial territory until 1999. So on the 21st of December, Donald Trump posted on his social media platform, Truth Social, he said, quote, "We will demand that the Panama Canal be returned to us in full and without question. To the officials of Panama, please be guided accordingly," end quote. This is a threat to a sovereign country. And in order to justify this threat of colonizing part of Panama, Donald Trump pointed to China. As always, he fearmongers about China. The Panamanian government condemned this threat by Trump, and Panama's president, Jose Raul Mulino, said, quote, "Every square meter of the Panama Canal and its adjacent areas belongs to Panama and will continue belonging to Panama," end quote. Now, what's ironic about this is that Mulino, the president of Panama, is from a right-wing party, and he's been a very pro-US politician. He's not in any way an anti-imperialist leftist, but even right-wing US allies in Latin America are scared now because the US president-elect is threatening to colonize and take over their territory. Panama's President Mulino stressed that, quote, "The canal has no direct or indirect control from China, nor the European Union, nor the United States, or any other power," end quote. In response to that, Donald Trump once again threatening Panama, saying, quote, "We'll see about that," end quote. And then Trump posted a photo with a US flag over water, and he said, "Welcome to the United States Canal." Again, this is a direct threat to colonize sovereign territory of a foreign country. And yet Elon Musk, the richest oligarch on earth, who helped to fund Donald Trump's presidential campaign and is going to be a top official in the second Trump administration, he tweeted, quote, "2025 is going to be so lit," laughing emoji, with these images of Donald Trump threatening to colonize Panama. So he thinks this is hilarious. He thinks this is funny that the US is threatening to colonize a foreign country. I should point out that Elon Musk is a blatant colonialist. He doesn't hide it. In fact, back in 2020, before he bought Twitter, before it became his property, Elon Musk infamously tweeted in response to a critic who condemned Elon Musk for backing the far-right coup in Bolivia under the Trump administration in 2019 that overthrew Bolivia's democratically elected left-wing president, Evo Morales, and Bolivia has large lithium reserves. So a person on Twitter criticized Musk and said, quote, "You know what wasn't in the best interest of the people? The US government organizing a coup against Evo Morales in Bolivia so you could get the lithium there," end quote. And then Musk responded saying, quote, "We will coup whoever we want. Deal with it," end quote. This is the world's richest oligarch saying, yeah, we'll organize a coup wherever we want. We'll overthrow any foreign government. I mean, these people are colonialists. They don't believe in sovereignty. They don't believe in independence. They believe that the US empire has the supposed right to colonize any country they want and to install puppets and to take over their resources and their territory. This is not isolationism. This is blatant colonialism. And meanwhile, as Trump and his political allies are threatening to colonize Latin America, what was China's response? China's foreign ministry spokesperson emphasized that, quote, "The Panama Canal is a great creation of the people of Panama," end quote, adding, quote, "China has always supported the people of Panama in their just cause for sovereignty over the canal," end quote. Beijing pointed out that going back to the 1960s, China supported the people of Panama in their struggle to regain sovereignty over the canal. And the spokeswoman emphasized again, quote, "China will always respect Panama's sovereignty over the canal," end quote. So China's response is the exact opposite. Western propaganda wants us to believe that supposedly China is threatening countries in the global south, but actually it's the United States that is threatening to colonize countries in the global south, and it's China that has constantly defended the sovereignty of formerly colonized countries in the global south. What we saw under Donald Trump in his first term and what we're seeing again as he prepares to enter the White House for a second term is US neocolonialism against Latin America in particular. In his first administration, Donald Trump nominated a series of warmongering neocons to oversee his foreign policy, including his Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, and his National Security Advisor, John Bolton, one of the architects of the Iraq War. And in his first term, those top Trump administration officials invoked the 200-year-old colonial Monroe Doctrine to claim that Latin America is the US empire's so-called backyard and to say that they can overthrow any government they want. They tried to overthrow the Venezuelan government. They tried to overthrow the Nicaraguan government, the Sandinistas. They tried to overthrow the revolutionary Cuban government. They did overthrow the Bolivian government. And of course, they used the excuse of China and Russia to justify it, just like now Trump again, as he prepares to enter the White House for a second term, he simply says, China, China, in order to try to justify colonizing the Panama Canal. We have to keep in mind the historical context. Look at this through the eyes of people in Latin America. The US has carried out dozens of invasions of countries all across Latin America over the past 2 centuries. The US military has intervened in almost every single country in Latin America. In some cases, the US has invaded multiple times, like Nicaragua has been invaded by the US 3 times. The CIA has backed coups and regime change operations, overthrowing numerous democratically elected governments. Panama itself is actually the perfect symbol of US imperialism in Latin America. In the late 19th century, US capitalist oligarchs known as the robber barons, like Cornelius Vanderbilt, were trying to build a canal in Central America. One of the key locations that they wanted was modern-day Panama, and at that time, Panama was part of Colombia. So in 1903, the US government tried to force Colombia to give the US control of this territory in order to make a canal, and the US tried to pressure the Colombian government to sign what was called the Hay-Herran Treaty. That would have given the US empire control over the territory of modern-day Panama for 100 years. However, the Senate of Colombia opposed this because they saw this as a form of US colonialism, which is what it was. So after the Colombian Senate opposed it, what was the response of the US? The US backed a separatist movement to create Panama in 1903. So essentially, the US was trying to create a colony by breaking off Panama from Colombia. In fact, the New York Times published an article in 1903 boasting that the government of Theodore Roosevelt in the US had backed the separatist movement in Panama and that the leaders of the Panamanian separatist movement had planned what was essentially a coup in New York City, in fancy, luxurious hotels from the US. They were funded by the United States to break off of Colombia in order to create a canal that the US empire would control on behalf of oligarchs like Vanderbilt. So then what happened? Immediately after Panama was created with US backing, the US took control over the territory that became the Panama Canal zone by signing the Hay-Buno-Varia Treaty, which was signed by the US Secretary of State John Hay on one side and a French diplomat on the other side, Philippe Jean Buno-Varia. There were no Panamanians represented in the signing of this treaty. It was blatant colonialism. This is the historical precedent that Donald Trump is citing to argue that the US should go back to taking over the Panama Canal. So with that treaty signed with the presence of no Panamanians, the US was given control over the Panama Canal zone. It built the canal over the next decade, and Panama had a series of US puppet regimes. However, that changed in 1968 when a revolutionary military officer came to power named Omar Torrijos. He was influenced by the Cuban Revolution. He was allied with Cuba. He supported the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. He also supported Salvador Allende, the democratically elected socialist president of Chile, who was overthrown in a CIA-orchestrated coup in 1973. So Omar Torrijos came to power in Panama, and he initiated what he called a revolution. He did land reform, giving land to poor peasants. He massively expanded healthcare for poor people. He expanded education. He built a lot of infrastructure and public works. He was a very progressive populist leader, and obviously he angered the United States, especially when he demanded that the US give Panama control over the Panama Canal. He opposed US colonialism in Panama. So in 1977, after more than 70 years of US colonialism in Panama, the US President Jimmy Carter was pressured to sign an agreement with Panama in what was known as the Torrijos-Carter Treaties that stated that Panama would get full control over the Panama Canal by 1999. However, just 4 years after signing this agreement, in 1981, Panama's revolutionary left-wing leader Torrijos died in a very suspicious plane crash. And in 2009, a retired Panamanian colonel and former Panamanian ambassador published a book in which he revealed that the CIA had backed an operation, this assassination. They had killed the leftist revolutionary leader Torrijos, and this was done in collaboration with the future military leader of Panama, Manuel Noriega. Noriega had been a longtime CIA asset who collaborated with US spies while also trafficking huge sums of drugs. So then 2 years after Torrijos was killed, who took power? It was Manuel Noriega. He was the de facto military leader of Panama in the 1980s. But although Noriega had been a longtime US ally, he proved to be unreliable. The US got very angry at him because he was independent. It's very similar to what happened with Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Originally, Saddam Hussein had also been a US ally against the Iraqi left, who were linked to the Soviet Union. But when Saddam Hussein came to power in, ironically, a CIA-backed military coup, he eventually turned against the US and he became much more independent. And of course, then eventually the US invaded Iraq in 2003 and overthrew his government and eventually executed Saddam Hussein. Something very similar happened back in 1989 in Panama. The US, under President George H.W. Bush, invaded Panama, killing hundreds of people, bombing working class neighborhoods. And then the US arrested Noriega, its former ally, took him out of the country, violating the sovereignty of Panama, treating Panama like a colony. For people who want more information about the 1989 US invasion of Panama, I recommend the documentary, The Panama Deception. It's a great documentary that provides more information about this event that was very important but has really been forgotten today. So what is the point I'm trying to get at here? Why did I go through all of that history? What I'm showing is that the US has treated Panama like a colony for basically all of its history. And here you have Donald Trump saying publicly, we are going to colonize the most important territory in Panama and take it over with no respect for this country's sovereignty. And it's not just Panama either. Donald Trump is also threatening several other countries. In fact, one day after Donald Trump threatened Panama, he posted another comment on his social media platform, Truth Social, in which Trump threatened to take over Greenland, which is an autonomous territory of Denmark. It was a Danish colony, but it got autonomy, and there are many indigenous communities in Greenland who want independence. They don't want to be a Danish colony. They certainly don't want to be a US colony either. They want independence and sovereignty. But what did Donald Trump say? He said, quote, "For purposes of national security and freedom throughout the world, the United States of America feels that the ownership and control of Greenland is an absolute necessity," end quote. And a bunch of right-wing pro-Trump accounts on social media that have millions of followers, like this account Wall Street Mav, which was previously Wall Street Silver, which is run by a 20-something former used car salesman in Canada, but it has millions of followers because Elon Musk has been promoting this account constantly. And they're making these comments about the US colonizing not only Greenland, but even Canada. And then they say, oh, well, it's a joke, but they're threatening to colonize these countries. Now, in the case of Greenland, it's very obvious why Donald Trump wants to take over this territory. It's because Greenland has very important and profitable rare earth minerals, which the US government really wants to get access to, especially because China, it plays such an important role in the global supply chain for rare earth minerals. So the US government, and this has been bipartisan under Republicans and Democrats, under Trump and under Joe Biden, the US has been trying to find alternatives so it doesn't rely on China to get access to rare earth minerals. So Donald Trump wants to colonize Greenland to take over its minerals. By the way, back in his first term, Trump tried to do the same thing with Afghanistan. He did not withdraw US troops from Afghanistan. He continued occupying the country. And one of the main reasons was he wanted to get access to the trillions of dollars of minerals in Afghanistan. So once again, Donald Trump is not in any way an isolationist. He is a blatant colonialist. And this is why when Trump made comments in December about turning Canada into the 51st state, annexing Canada, his supporters said, oh, it was a joke, stop being a snowflake. But again, this is a country, the US, that has a history of invading dozens of countries around the world, constantly militarily intervening. The US itself was founded through colonialism, through the ethnic cleansing of indigenous nations in the modern day United States, in taking over all of their territory, in taking over Hawaii, which had its own independent sovereign government until the US took it over. Still today, the US has numerous colonies like Puerto Rico. And now Trump is talking about taking over Canada and saying, oh, well, it's a joke. And I mean, look, I have no sympathy for Justin Trudeau. I think he's been a horrible leader. He's also pro-war. Trudeau has supported many imperialist policies as well, including Israel's brutal war on Gaza and ethnic cleansing in Gaza, including the coup attempt in Venezuela, including the war on Yemen. The list goes on. But Canada is an independent sovereign country, and the US president-elect is threatening to annex them. And these huge pro-Trump accounts on social media, like this Twitter account Wokeness that has more than 3 million followers, largely because Elon Musk, who's now the owner of Twitter, has been constantly promoting this account Wokeness on nearly a daily basis. But accounts like this are sending out tweets that get thousands of shares and tens of thousands of likes saying, Trump is right, the US should take over the Panama Canal. And in response to this, on the 22nd of December, someone responded and said, quote, let's invade a sovereign country and occupy and control its territory in order to extract income, destabilizing that country and inevitably the region in clear violation of international law with the support of 0 countries in the world, alienating all of our allies. And this stupid Wokeness account, their response was yes, with this dumb meme, as if they're being like based or something. So they're saying that they're imperialists, they're colonialists. They do not believe in sovereignty. They're the opposites of isolationists. They want a US global dictatorship in which the US can colonize any foreign country, in which the US empire can invade any foreign country and take over their natural resources. And they see this as being based. And if you oppose colonialism, then you're supposedly woke. This is how they're defining woke. And earlier I mentioned this account, Wall Street Mav, formerly Wall Street Silver, run by a used car salesman in Canada. That this account is constantly promoted by Elon Musk. It has 1.5 million followers, and they're posting these insane things, quoting Manifest Destiny, arguing that the US empire should colonize all of North America. And again, this End Wokeness account with 3.3 million followers, which is constantly promoted by Elon Musk, they're posting maps in which the US empire colonizes Mexico and Canada and Nicaragua and Cuba and the Dominican Republic. I mean, they are trying to build a US Reich. This is blatant fascist colonialism. And they say, oh, well, it's a joke. It's not a joke when Donald Trump and his nominees to be in his administration are making plans for an invasion of Mexico. This is not just an internet joke. These are not stupid memes. They're actually making plans to send US troops into Mexico. In the name of supposedly combating drug cartels, which are using US weapons, by the way, the Donald Trump team is making potential proposals, including drone strikes or airstrikes in Mexico, sending in US military trainers and advisors, deploying US kill teams on Mexican soil, waging cyber warfare, and having US special forces conduct raids and abductions inside Mexico. The sovereign elected government of Mexico, President Claudia Sheinbaum, has said that they oppose this 100%. They do not support the US sending troops into Mexico. If Trump does this, and he's talking about it, this would be an invasion. In fact, Donald Trump's nominee to be his border czar, Tom Homan, has said clearly that Trump plans on sending troops into Mexico in order to wipe out the cartels, he claims. But again, this is a violation of Mexico's sovereignty. Donald Trump's nominee to be National Security Advisor, who is a neoconservative war hawk named Mike Waltz, he introduced legislation into the US Congress that would give the US military the authorization to invade Mexico. They are making very clear plans to do this. This is not just some media story. They boast about it on their own congressional websites. And again, Mike Waltz, he's not just a nobody. He's going to be Donald Trump's national security advisor. Donald Trump's nominees are also talking about proposals to bomb Iran. This was reported by the Wall Street Journal, which is a pro-Republican, pro-Trump newspaper. They said very clearly that they want to launch airstrikes on Iran in the name of stopping its nuclear program. But again, this would be another blatant war of aggression, of course, in alliance with Israel. And Donald Trump has made it clear as day that he strongly supports Israel's war on Gaza, its war in Lebanon, its occupation of Syrian territory. Donald Trump, when he was president the first time, recognized Israel's illegal occupation of Syrian sovereign territory in the Golan Heights. And in return, thanking Trump, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu opened a new illegal Israeli settlement in occupied Syrian territory called Trump Heights. And this isn't even to mention China. Trump is constantly threatening China, and he has filled his cabinet with extreme China hawks, including the king of the neocons, Marco Rubio, who's going to be leading Trump's State Department, overseeing U.S. foreign policy. Marco Rubio has never seen a war he didn't love. Trump also announced that his Undersecretary of Defense for Policy in the Pentagon will be another extreme China hawk named Elbridge Colby, who, by the way, is the grandson of the former CIA director William Colby, who oversaw Operation Phoenix in Vietnam and the horrific crimes against humanity committed by the CIA in Vietnam. Elbridge Colby, who will be helping to run Donald Trump's Pentagon, has proudly referred to himself as a hawk. He said, quote, "I own being a hawk right now vis-a-vis China. specifically that we need to dramatically upgrade our preparedness for war, end quote. He wants the US to prepare for potential war with China. Of course, he claims that he wants to prepare for war in order to deter war, but this is what every war hawk says. They always say, I don't want to start the war, but I want to be prepared for when we need to fight the war. This is what they all say. If you look at Elbridge Colby's Twitter account, basically every day, all he tweets about is how the US needs to prepare for war with China. And he constantly says, quote, China is our top national security threat, end quote. These are the people whom Donald Trump has nominated to run both the State Department and the Pentagon. They're all war hawks. And meanwhile, Trump claims that he's going to create a Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, run by billionaires Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. And he says he's going to bring down the deficit. But in reality, Republicans in the House of Representatives, of course, who were allied with Trump, they introduced the so-called DOGE Act, the law. And what do? They want to cut social spending. They want to cut spending on the economy, on education, on transportation, on healthcare, on energy, on climate. And meanwhile, they reduce the Pentagon budget by $0. The US Senate already approved a military budget of $895 billion, nearly $1 trillion. And when you consider all of the other spending related to the military, like veteran spending and Department of Energy spending, like nuclear weapons, which are not under the Pentagon, they're under energy spending, the Department of Energy. The US military budget is well over $1 trillion. Some economists estimate that it's $1.5 trillion and increasing every single year. And yet Donald Trump and the Republican allies he has in Congress and Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and DOGE, they're not planning on cutting the military budget. On the contrary, they're going to increase spending on the military while cutting social spending that actually helps people. And by the way, one of the reasons for this is that Donald Trump's cabinet is full of billionaires who benefit from huge Pentagon contracts. They've gotten billions of dollars of subsidies and contracts from the Pentagon, including Elon Musk. But it's not just Elon Musk and his companies. There are 11 billionaires who are going to be top officials in Trump's administration. Trump himself is, of course, a billionaire. And there are many other oligarchs with hundreds of millions of dollars who are going to be running his government, including and especially in the Pentagon, profiting from the military-industrial complex. Of course, in this sense, Donald Trump is not unique. Every single US president for decades has been a war criminal, has been an imperialist who has backed invasions and wars and regime change operations and coups around the world. That includes, of course, Joe Biden. That includes Barack Obama. It includes Bill Clinton, includes George Bush Jr. and Sr., Reagan, the list goes on, Richard Nixon. But Donald Trump claims that he's going to stop war, which is absurd. He never stopped war in his first administration. Donald Trump supporters claim that he's an isolationist who's going to make America great again and not focus on foreign wars. But in reality, we can see from his first term and from the people he selected for his second term, from his threats against Panama and Greenland and Mexico and Canada and the list, and China and Iran, and the list goes on, we can see that in reality, Donald Trump's plan is to make US imperialism great again, to make the US empire great again. His so-called populist rhetoric about stopping wars and being an isolationist and opposing intervention, that was just propaganda when he was running for president. And now that he's planning on coming back to the White House, he is going to be extremely aggressive in trying to expand the US empire around the world. And of course, we here at Geopolitical Economy Report will be constantly reporting on these crimes committed by the US empire. We did it under Joe Biden, the Democrat, and we will do it under Trump, the Republican. We're completely opposed to this kind of partisan US politics. Both parties are complicit in these crimes. But Donald Trump should not be considered a populist alternative. And we have shown in our reporting why, and we will continue showing that in the future. I want to thank everyone for joining me today. I am Ben Norton, the editor-in-chief of Geopolitical Economy Report. Please like and subscribe. Please share this. I will see you all next time.